Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the Don't Be Afraid podcast. I am your, do I call it host? Do I call it? Anyway, I'm Tolu Onilere, and I am the one driving things today. Don't want to waste a lot of time, so I want to get on to the guest that we have, has graciously agreed to be on this podcast, and you've got to read her profile. I mean, that's like in itself a 10-minute read. So I'm going to just do a very brief one and then let her introduce herself properly. I know myself, I'll miss something, then I'll spend the next 5 years apologizing for it. So please join me in welcoming Tracy Okoro-Isaac, who is the CEO of Ventures Park, which is one of the biggest technology hubs in Nigeria. So Tracy, thank you for agreeing to join, to take part, to be interviewed. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tolu.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I said, so I don't murder your profile, everything, please tell us about you.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you about two personalities of Tracy. So there is Tracy, who is the fixer, right? Who is the executioner. So she's the one you come to when you want to do work, when you want results. Tracy is the one who's working hand in hand with, a lot of people in the country to solve for precision and pace, just making sure that we get the required results that we need. But then there's also Tracy, who is the indoor person, right? Tracy, who likes to be by herself. But in a nutshell, Tracy is someone who's a lawyer, public policy advocate, work with government, but also I'm a consultant in the digital economy space, making sure that we are creating the right incentives and initiatives that will build a better technology ecosystem for Nigeria.
Which explains why we wanted you on here, because we're going through a process right now where we're interviewing a few content creators, just talking to them about their process, their journey, their story. And it's meant to be about trying to share stories of growth, to share stories of success that help, within the digital ecosystem, and might hopefully inspire others to understand what they could be doing, whether it's content, whether it's for business or whatever it is. Because that word digital economy, I mean, how do you define it? What is the digital economy?
So I'm going to look at the digital economy as an economy, right, that sort of encompasses all economic activities driven by digital technologies, right? And this includes both the production, consumption of digital goods and services, whether it be e-commerce, whether it be digital communications, and basically the use of data for business insights, right? And at Ventures Park, we literally operate at the intersection of that technology and innovative space, right, where we're actively contributing to the ecosystem by providing, conducive environment for whether it be content creators, people in the creative sector, people in the technology sector, SMEs, just making sure that innovation continues to thrive, that startups are supported. And this also includes, policy, making sure that there's the right policies and incentives are there, but also it also includes that the right frameworks that induces maybe funding or some other support from different stakeholders in the ecosystem works.
Okay, great. So we can't get away from the fact that right now there's a whole load of conversations around digital. We've got a new minister in place, and they've sort of come out very, very clearly and very much around the idea that there is an opportunity out in digital. But that's the government speaking. I'd love to hear what as somebody who's working in that sector, what do you think, what do you see are the opportunities?
So I see first and foremost an opportunity for us to, in the regulatory part of it, for us to realign and redesign what that framework will look like for the innovation, ecosystem, but also for the digital economy itself. We have an opportunity to redesign what we want to look like. Part of that opportunity is what the Nigerian Startup Act sort of opened up for us, a platform that doesn't solve all the problem, but just gives us sort of like a leverage for us to begin to look at all the challenges and opportunities surrounding the technology ecosystem. I also see it as an opportunity for us to diversify inside where the new minister is talking about, talent training programs, skill acquisition. I'm not looking at just one part of it. I'm looking at how can we leverage technology at this moment to be able to boost all the different sectors in the economy. So I'm talking agri, I'm talking health, I'm talking um, manufacturing. How do we leverage? We are at the right opportunity where we can do that, right? We have a market reach. We have a large demand space. It's also an opportunity for collaboration, right? Being able to create partnerships within the digital ecosystem to offer innovators, entrepreneurs, practitioners opportunities to be able to leverage synergies and enhance their value propositions.
Let me step back a bit and sort of, as a proud Nigerian, or what do you call it? I mean, there's that thing, Nigeria know they carry last and whatever it is, but are we innovative? Because there's the idea that, look, we've got a very young footprint. That's meant to be one of the good advantages we have. From your experience, are we innovative?
So yes, I mean, I'm going to say that at this moment in the innovation, Nigeria truly know the career last. We are innovative, but what hasn't happened is that synergy sync between the different stakeholders in that value chain in the ecosystem. So there's still sort of like a lap, right? So we have some players that have sort of moved up in that innovation space where they understand the need for us to automate, innovate, and keep making sure that our processes, policies, programs, initiatives are working in tandem with the future or what is expected of this future, this digital future. But we still have different stakeholders that are yet to be brought up to speed to that. And so that sort of mismatch or that sort of lapse, right, is still creating some sort of bottlenecks at the moment.
Great, because I mean, the reason why I wanted to ask that, because I mean, there's the element of the first part of, like, yes, so we are innovative, but
Mhm.
how important? I mean, because you mentioned and you talk about the stakeholders, it's not enough to just have the idea. There must be an enabling environment to enable.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how? I mean, again, sort of, maybe going back over it. How important is? How do we create that? How do we get our people into a stage where, because you get so many reports about the ease of doing business. You get, on the one hand, you hear that report about, okay, yes, issues are setting up, but we've got, they're now trying to set up so that you can set up a company online yourself. So those little things, and then you also then hear, on the other hand, about Nigerians as hustlers, and not just. Well, yeah, I use the word hustlers to also cover innovators. How important is it, beyond just the individual, that our stakeholders catch up?
So first and foremost, we all have to just sort of get on the same page. And that prototype was what the Nigerian Startup Act sort of solved for, right? And that was really hard, but that was something that showed that is achievable. We had to bring a lot of the stakeholders to be on the same page to understand where we wanted to get to and how we were aiming to sort of get there. And that required hundreds, almost 1,000 people who were working together from different parts of the world, both core Nigerians and non Nigerians, working together for a certain goal. And so that's why the NSA is sort of intersected and interlooped all around with partnerships and collaboration. And so what that needs to do is the minister and all the different other stakeholders in the technology and innovation ecosystem, they need to sit down. I typically say to people that one of our greatest problems in this country is that people, or in the world, is that people don't talk to people. When people speak to people, issues get sorted. When people don't speak to people, assumptions are made and then
Mhm.
people come out, issues come out, right? And so we need to sit down and not our regular, workshops and town halls and things that we do with no concrete outcome in mind, right? But this is a heart to heart with the ecosystem to say, hey guys, so this is where we want to go. We understand that these are all the problems surrounding it. And we understand that every one of us, we have our so-called outputs and what we want to achieve. How do we all come together to be able to create something that is able to work for all of us? But what would we agree that is the single factor that if we do achieve it, it means that we've achieved at least 60 to 70% of our entire goal, right? And then when that is agreed and people understand that there are no hidden hidden emotions or hidden agendas. There are no biases. It's simply just a country coming together to work together to make sure that they provide that so-called enabling environment for the young footprint, which you referred to earlier, for them to be able to work hand in hand with the different stakeholders to deliver an economy that is prosperous but yet democratized. That's for me. That's for me the first. Because if we all don't agree on something, then we're all going to be working, in different areas to try to achieve different things. And at the end of the day, we would have the meager resources that we have would have been splashed around different places, and the results we probably will have achieved wouldn't be tangible enough for it to be recorded as impact, right? And so that's the first thing. Like when you asked earlier about opportunities, and I'm thinking that the minister also needs to he needs to aggregate. He needs to be the aggregator where he brings everybody and has a heart to heart. And this is not just selecting, handpicking people in. No, no, it's the various people that play a very huge part of creating this enabling ecosystem. So, for example, I keep using the NSA because that was one prototype that really worked. So, for the part of business registration, ease of business, we had to talk to CAC, we had to talk to about maybe about 500 MDAs and the rest, right? To be able to get them to understand what we were trying to do. And so they got ownership in it. And that's why there weren't a lot of people saying kicking back when when the act was pushed. And so that's why it became the fastest act on the floor to go. An act as heavy and as, important as that. And so that's an opportunity I also see here for the ecosystem, that we come together and agree what's our goal, what do we want to achieve here. And so everybody now knows that this is Nigeria is our client, and we are all solving for one client and not solving everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to have do they call it fans or fan moment? Because when I gave you the opportunity to introduce yourself, you didn't mention it, but the conversation, I'm picking up that you were involved in the Nigerian Startup Act. You didn't
Yeah,
say
so
that.
I was head of engagement, but then I have transited to become the state adoption lead. Because the beautiful thing is, there is,
Not
while we
worthy.
now have a
Sorry.
Nigerian Startup Act, we're on a federal system of government. So which means that if states do not buy into this idea, we just have it in the federal system, and it's not going to trickle down as much as we want to trickle down. But also, this enabling environment that we are trying to create, we want to be able to create it in such a way that entrepreneurs, innovators, and practitioners in Enugu State are able to just stay in Enugu and build fantastic value chain propositions or build fantastic products that can be used all over the country, right? Without them having to go to Lagos, because Lagos has a better environment or has a better demand structure. Do you
Okay.
understand? Yes. So yes.
No, we're
Yeah,
not
I'm
worthy.
proud.
No,
That's one of my
sorry.
proud.
Very in depth. No, because you just sort of like slipped that in there. Come on, people
Hmm.
need to know. People need to know that we know
It
important people. Thank
it
you.
was true hard work. It was true hard work. And so, when you really work hard for something, you're no longer about the glory. It's just about that it finally happened.
Yeah, absolutely. But we know that we have challenges. We're trying to sort out job creation. We're looking at the areas and all the different things where opportunity lies. For somebody listening to this, what is the Nigeria Startup Act? Before they go and do their own research, what is it? Are you able to give us a nutshell of what is it about?
So the Nigerian Startup Act came at the intersection of disruption and displacement. And so I'm going to explain it in a nutshell, like you said. So the government promises that, we're going to provide 10 million jobs. And they're working hard, truly working hard to be able to create those 10 million jobs. They're young innovators and entrepreneurs who are disruptors who decide that, let's take the fintech sector and let's see how we can solve problems there. And they go right ahead and build and disrupt, regardless of the government, right? And when they do that, 4 million people lose their jobs. And not because these disruptors were building with that in mind, but they just built something that sort of built in some sort of redundancy of people who aren't automated to do that work. So I'm going to take the bank app as an example. So when that bank app came, a lot of banks laid off people because, well, not a lot of people were coming to banks anymore. And so that's what happened. Now you see the government promising to provide 10 million jobs. Now they have 4 million people that have been laid off. So they have 14 million people to think of. And the government is just upset because this is not like blindsiding them. And so that's what we call displacement. And
Okay.
so the government is upset. They don't understand it. And so they begin to ban. So they ban this, they ban that, and they begin to put together all this. They begin to raise all the structures that form bottlenecks for the innovation ecosystem. So in the realization of this, we're now saying, okay, the Nigeria Startup Act became that co-created legislation that sort of provided regulatory certainty, but also sort of solved some of the key challenges of that ecosystem with the government in mind. So in the future, startups will now build, but also with the government in mind, so that if we're building something that's going to totally disrupt an industry, there is preparation for it. So if jobs, people need to pivot, if people need to train ahead of time for what the new jobs of that new disruption will look like, the government will be prepared for it so that instead of loss of jobs, there will be a transfer of talent and skills to prepare for that new industry. Do you understand what it is now?
Mm-hmm.
So we try to solve it with different pillars. Those four pillars were funding, which is very key, but also capacity development, which is capital development, but also regulation. We wanted to make sure that regulations were clear. So you and I understood where your right started and where your right stopped. And then finally was infrastructure. Now, it's not necessarily infrastructure like, houses, building, but about soft and hard infrastructure in the case of internet connectivity, for example, making sure that there's right of way in states so that big corporations that want to sort of lay their cables are able to do it, right? For example, I know that we're having new undersea cables that are coming into Nigeria. But we want to see other players come in, and internet penetration and connectivity in the country will come to a point where virtual education will work. Because at the moment, that's a great solution, but it's not that great because we still have lots of areas in Nigeria where people cannot be able to access these edtech portals, right? And so these are some of the things that the Nigerian Startup Act sought to be able to solve the problem through these pillars. Yeah.
Kudos. I mean, would you call it? I can just imagine one of the things that is interesting is understanding. We've been talking about from our internally within my agency, or the agency where I work, about the idea of the digital ripple. The fact that, that idea of when you drop a pebble or something, a stone in water, the ripple effect and where it spreads out to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how, I think that us as individuals, as the general public, don't understand that. We don't understand that impact. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do, even with this series, is to show that fact that, listen, look, the fact that this person, produces this video or does this content means that that other person has got a potential job, which means that that person who's the editor, that person who wrote the music, the person who sold so all of that, and that idea of the digital ripple. And I think what you just said just demonstrates that so much. The fact that we are all so intertwined, that we're a community, that we're so interconnected that it's interesting. Kudos, not worthy, definitely not
Thank
worthy.
you.
No, but people talk about solutions by Nigerians for Nigerians. Is that what this is about, or is it just the fact that, because when you look at, let's look at a fintech, I think it might be Paystack or Flutterwave, who launches a product, gets investment funding from outside the country, and then ends up, potentially building a product that is Africa-wide or is being sponsored, and the head office, from a development point of view, now moves out. Is the focus on finding solutions for Nigeria, or is it just about, look, innovate? Whatever that is, whether it is the next Airbnb, whether it's the next hydrogen car, whatever it is, just innovate. Or is it, how do we solve Nigerian problems?
So the idea is what you call local solutions for local problems and scale to international markets, right? And startups never start out trying to solve for the world. Startups just trying to solve a problem for a target audience. And then you start to understand when you go to market that there's a larger market of people with that problem, and so that's why that the startup scene is very iterative. So you're going to keep going and coming back because now that problem statement either keeps evolving or it keeps enlarging, and so you have to keep building properly to be able to accommodate that evolution. To solve Nigerian problems is great, but then the Nigerian problems aren't just very akin to Nigeria. There are also some of the problems that are akin to Africa. And that's why for VP, so Ventures Park is one of the expressions of the main company called Ventures Platform, right? For us, our theory of change was basically about providing democratized access to economic prosperity for Africa. And how we wanted to do that was to support mission driven entrepreneurs, innovators, practitioners, and experts who were building products and services that were plugging gaps and solving for access. And so it wasn't about solving for consumables, it was about non consumables. What are the things that actually need to be solved? Access to quality education, access to quality health, access to basic services. It could be logistics, whatever it is, right? And so this were the entrepreneurs and innovators and practitioners that we were focused on, or we are focused on solving for. And then the three arms sort of was like the park, which was the infrastructural space that provided a collaborative workspace. And I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm trying to sing about Ventures Park, but it's more about that theory that I'm trying to explain. And then there was the foundation. The foundation was sort of the home of the pipeline where there were grants, equity and non-equity grants that just came in to sort of fund these solutions. And then we moved it up to the fund, right, which at the moment is more than a $48 million fund. Now, the idea of these
Wait,
three
wait, wait. No,
is
no, no,
that,
no. Sorry. Sorry. Nigerians, when you hear dollars, we have to go back. You just threw that in $48 million fund.
oh yes, at the
Okay.
moment, but we've started to look out again, and so it probably will increase to a lot more.
Okay. Right.
Yes,
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Okay. Please continue. Sorry about that. That's the
thank
thing.
you.
Numbers, dollars get people's eyes going bing, 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 bing. So just wanted to call
But
that out.
this wouldn't be possible, this wouldn't be possible without the environment that we're trying to create for. And these startups are, for example, also content creators. For example, I know we had like four movies that we just invested in, right? And so that's how you know that it's not just about technology solutions, but also we moved into the creative sector, right? To look at how do we make sure that businesses that are in this sector are also thriving, that they're not sort of cut short at their early stages because maybe they don't have access to quality funding, because funding but quality funding is different, right? They don't have access to quality funding. They don't have access to the right people in the value chain that will help with whether it's the production or the distribution. And just like you mentioned, your agency. And we're also looking at startups that are also pushing a lot of content creation out there in the ecosystem. But basically, I don't want us to just look at it as Nigerian solutions. So these solutions might come up from Nigerians, but the solutions we build in Nigeria are sort of prototypes towards how we want to look at solving Africa's problem, right? I remember during COVID, we were trying to create a program, and that program was supposed to be a program where once we solved it, we would white label it. And white labeling it means giving access to Africa, right? So that every other person can see how we solve these problems in agriculture, in the health sector, manufacturing sector, in the logistics sector, and they can deploy that same exact solution free of charge. And we will just have that ripple effect that you've talked about. So while I applaud our Nigerian solutions, the thing with Nigerian solutions is that means that you sort of withholding yourself to a smaller market, even though Nigeria is such a large market. But you want to be able to create a solution that serves the world, right? But first and foremost, is it solving the Nigerian problem? Great. It is solving it very well. Great. Are you the right person to solve for it when it finally evolves? Great. Then how do we scale? And that scale now includes we scale to Africa and other parts of the world. And I
Um,
hope I tried to. some sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to just say something that I think you've been very gracious about it. And I'm still going to come back and talk about Ventures Park. I think that it's a great initiative or great platform. So, I mean, you've been very gracious in not, as you said, listen, look, not talking about your role and all those sort of things. And I'm going to come back at some point and ask you about if you can tell us about some of the startups that you're working with that you're excited about and the solutions that you think you see coming out, whether that's through Ventures Park or just generally in the ecosystem. But for now, let me start off with you talked about the 10 million jobs creation and then that thing of the impact. I want to talk about or ask about the digital economy and job creation, and where you see that playing, where you see the the impact.
So back to this ethos, this theory of change I'm saying. We believe that businesses are the ones that create jobs, right? And so supporting businesses or supporting innovators to build viable, sustainable businesses equals to creating jobs, right? And so in the digital economy, in the digital space, there is a huge opportunity for us repositioning ourselves, but in acquisition of skills, right? Like for me now, I'm not focused in training technical talents and I mean technical talents, I'm saying technical talents in the fact that, for example, software development and the rest, where the world is moving towards. I'm focused in training technical talents, for example, in the agricultural space, meaning that I want to have skilled labor, people who are able to use the new agricultural tools of now to be able to solve for food insecurity, right? To plug for those gaps in the agricultural sector. I want to train for skilled labor in the health sector. I want to train for all those other sectors where there's massive jobs. Are there going to be massive jobs in the technology space where, software development, data analysis and all that? Yeah. But there's a larger demand in these other spaces. And so that's where I'm going to go to. So yes, as the digital economy continues to evolve, I anticipate, increased job creation, probably a boost in GDP contribution and probably a surge in valuation of the digital sector. But this growth will be driven by ongoing technological advancement. And it's not just in that critical tech space, but in the critical sectors where human beings thrive, right? There's also going to be a need for increased digital adoption. And when I say this digital adoption, it's in the things that I'm saying that how can I reduce the churn rate for farmers? How can I reduce churn rate in hospitals? How can I keep automating triaging? How can I get the large number of people who aren't in that I don't want to that literacy space to get to start to learn how to adopt the new digital technologies that will come up, and also how do we start to look at the development of new disruptive business models. Once we can and anticipate this, integrate it, and find a way to loop it in, yeah, there will be a lot of jobs created. But you see, the problem I am very scared of is that if we, while we're creating these solutions, if we don't speak to each other, and when I mean speak to each other, it means that all the stakeholders need to speak to each other, MDAs, government, and NGOs, private sector. If we don't speak to each other, we're going to be building with lapses. So, for example, let's say the minister says that right now he's focusing on the agricultural sector. And what will happen will be that there will be a lot of venture capital flowing to the agricultural sector because it looks like that's where the government is linking to what the government is. These small things matter. And then all the other sectors will sort of have a decline because, well, people think that if the government is there, then there will be favorable policies and whatever there. And then also, if the government is very revenue motivated rather than impact driven, it will also affect that ecosystem because rather than work hand in hand with the ecosystem to develop impact, which will now generate revenue, they will be so focused on revenue that impact dies.
There's so much that I don't know. I'm going to pick up on a few things. I'm going to talk about GDP. I want to talk about regulators.
Okay.
I also want to talk about. I love that what you just said about understanding that impact, focus on impact, and that then drives revenue. I think that so often people don't do that. And what we normally do as individuals is just go, look, that's revenue, that's the focus, and forget the fact that if we can solve the impact, if we can create that impact and generate or whatever it is, or do, and I hate using this word, but do good and build skills and all that kind of stuff. That the domino effect, the ripple effect, is that yes, there will be revenue and stuff. But so I want to go back to, you mentioned GDP, and it's something that I think a lot of us, whether consciously or not, with the economy and all that kind of stuff, are impacted by. You made a point that digital really is not just tech, as in it's not software. It is in every single sector, and we need to reg and organize that and understand the digital economy covers all of that. If we can get it right, what do you foresee as the impact on the GDP? I don't know if that's if it's a fair question, or if it's stuff that, because in all the sort of conversations you had,
I can't give you numbers, right? But I know, like I said earlier, that there is going to be a super boost in the GDP contribution if we get it right. And getting it right is that there's going to be a surge in the valuation of the digital sector, but we need to diversify or divest from thinking about the digital sector in just that critical technological space where we're talking software development and all that, is that it touches every other sector of our human interface, right? And so digital means that, for example, logistics, right? People might want to build apps about and everything, but the guys who are riding, the riders who are coming to people, do they know how to use this? Would they be able to adopt that technology where you give them a phone and they can use the Google map to be able to make for that? Can I train those guys for that? Because as much as you as a business, you have an app that gets me, just like an Uber, right? If the Uber driver cannot use the phone, the app in the phone, then I can order an Uber from now till tomorrow, and I won't have a lot of people who will come, I won't have a lot of a market, because then while there's demand, I can't meet the demand because I don't have the skilled labor there. So that guy, it doesn't require the software development. That guy requires to understand how to use the basic, technology, and how to, that's the digital adoption, right? So that's it. And I'm just using that example. It could touch every sector you could think about. And so that's what I would like that we look at the big picture of the digital economy. And that's what is going to give that significant boost to our GDP. Whether it be in job creation or access creation, that's what will give us that boost. Do you understand?
yeah.
It is, because if we do focus on just that small sector of the digital landscape, which is just that preparing, for example, AI at the moment. How does AI affect food delivery? I mean, that's the big picture. What of the middle picture? I know there's an organization called Digita at the moment that's solving for digital evolution, and that's where the key is, right? What's that big picture? A lot of countries are leapfrogging, but they're leapfrogging and crossing over all the different stages that they should have thought about. Because everybody's saying AI now. You have a country who hasn't even gone through the other phases of the digital transformation and evolution process, just quickly leapfrog into talking about AI. But there are things that need to be in place before your AI can build, right? So that's what I'm saying. Yes, there will be a fantastic boost in GDP contribution, but it can only happen where there are concerted efforts in the different sectors, right? Whether it be in trade and investment, whether it be in the diaspora, whether it be in health, whether it be in home care, child care. What are the different ways that the development of digital technological advancements can help in those sectors? And if we can push and leverage it, jobs everywhere. And jobs mean what? Economic transfers and economic transactions. And what does that give? Impact, revenue.
Okay, thank you. Great. I agree. Totally. Totally. I want to ask, and I don't know if this is, because you've mentioned about talking to each other. I don't know if this is possible or fair for you to, a fair question. What do you think as individuals we need to do? Because I'm then going to also come back and get, what do you think that our stakeholders as regulators or government need to do? What do you think we as individuals need to do within this, in talking to each other? Yeah.
We need to drop the personal bias and agendas, right? And look at our country as the one client. When they were choosing, ministers in the country, there's something I do with my dad. We sort of start to, I grew up with a father who's very logical, very, but he's very strategic. And so that's how he raised us. And so we start to do a mathematics and he says, come to me in his studio and he's saying, how do you think this new government should pick its ministers? And I'm saying that first and foremost, the new government needs to see itself as a client. And the ministers they are bringing together are consultants who are solving a problem for the client. So if the health minister wants to solve a health problem, it's not just him that is solving it. The health challenge touches across maybe 15 other ministries. So he brings all these people together. So the health challenge, the shortage of skilled labor, it touches the Minister of Labor, right? So they all come together and look at that problem and see how each and every one of them will solve the different problems that have been identified, that at the end of the day, their result will sort of ripple effect on the different ministries because you're solving for one client, which is Nigeria. But what happens is that the Minister of Health is solving his own, Labor is solving his own. So all of this is siloed and scattered. And at the end of the day, none of the solutions are talking to each other. None of the solutions match because they weren't solved for the same users, right? And so we have a problem with adoption. And once we have a problem with adoption, those solutions are dropped when a new government comes.
Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
So that's it for me.
All righty. Because the flip side is, what does the government or what do regulators need to do? What does the government need to do?
Drop,
Because
drop the agenda, drop the bias, and come together with one goal in mind to solve for Nigeria. And that's why it looks like the private sector is an entirely totally different based on its own, because the way the engine of government is built, it's not built to churn very well. And so we keep complaining, but it's not churning because they're not connected properly. Everybody just sort of has their own set guidelines and agenda and they're going to it. So if everybody says to themselves that we want to do health problem, we want to solve health challenges, what are all the different ministries that are connected? What are different places? And then you bring everybody together. And even the funding is brought together. So each one, MDA, and anywhere, private sector, anybody that's playing has like a line item to deliver, right? It's not one person doing everything, has a line item to deliver. You would see that there is more stakeholder participation because then you know the user you're solving for, right? So Ministry of Health says these are the problems it's having. Labor is saying this is the problem we are having with finding new skilled labor. Everybody now knows what it is. It's like a work plan. You now know what are the different activities that need to be done to achieve this outcome. And everybody takes their activities and goes at it holistically for 1 year. At the end of the year, what you would see will be an impact-driven government, a set of regulators who are not about revenue generation, but about impact. But what would happen at the end of the day is that you're still going to get revenue and impact. Why? Because anywhere that you are solving a problem, there's definitely revenue coming for it because people are always going to pay for their problems to be solved.
Yeah, preaching to the choir. I absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. It is. I mean, because it is that thing of, look, we have one Nigeria, we have one country, and let's hope and believe that we are all looking for the betterment of that country. And so, an understanding, they talk about it takes a village to raise a child, and I think it takes a a village to raise to raise a village. It takes all of us to working together to understand the community and understand the fact that we're not individuals. So absolutely fantastic. As of today, what do you see as the challenges that your startups, whether in Ventures Park I mean, what do you see the challenges that, because we've talked about opportunities that are out there, what do you see as the challenges that exist at the moment?
I mean, and this is me. I'm going to also still refer back to Nigerian Startup Act. One of the greatest problems was regulatory certainty. The fact that some we just wake up and you hear there's one new policy, right? And you see how in so many ways the new policy sort of sets hundreds of thousands of businesses way back. Jobs are lost, and you're wondering,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm looking for great words to use, right?
No, sorry. I wish the guys because I wish the guys listening could actually see your face. I mean, that captures it all. The
I mean, I
picture.
know, but like, just not to use swear words, like
Don't worry, it's an 18.
WTF,
Yeah,
right? What's going on? Like, who thinks about these things, right? And so you start to ask yourself, when you ask yourself this question, you start to also try to find the answer, because you are still a business person. And I'm going to use this example. Go Kada. The government of Lagos woke up one morning and they shut down, and people just lost their jobs. Like, you came out to work in the morning, just lost your jobs, no agreement, no, you didn't do anything. Do you understand? Just because the government said one thing,
like that.
and there weren't meetings or anything that was done in light of that, it just happened. And that is not just it's not just the loss of jobs, it's the fact that that guy's children who just lost his job will be sent out of school.
Yeah,
And because he's been sent out of school, he might end up becoming a criminal. Do you understand? Just there are ripple effects to it, right? How all these things, just one decision would have happened. And
absolutely.
so our one of the greatest problems our startups face is the regulatory certainty. So whether it be in the fintech sector, the fact that there's no alignment between the policies that CBN is creating and the favorable policies with best practices all over the world. So we are constantly in a struggle to make sure that the the business environment in Nigeria is not the one that is stifling constantly because of regulatory uncertainty, right? For example, the introduction of the e-naira, I think the government had fantastic, maybe thoughts in mind when they brought it in. But the reason why the adoption is low because it's seen as a competitor rather than as an enabler, right? And these are things we're talking about, right? And there's so many things I can give you. I can think of one more that we learned. So we were just having this program with some content creators, and one of them asked about how they now have to pay for their for approval for their adverts and stuff like that. And the story that that person created was that I'm a small business person who's selling makeup, and I'm just hoping to make about 10, 15,000, at the end of maybe the month with my sales. And if I have to pay that 10, 15,000 just to advertise it, what am I making? Why am I even here as a business, right? And so it leads us back to what I'm saying, that people need to speak to people. So I think that with the regulatory uncertainty, we need government. We need all the different people we need the legal arm of government. We need the different MDAs and agencies. We need the National Assembly to sort of come together and talk to businesses and say, what do you really need? And think thoroughly about it, and then say, okay, we're going to do this for you, but you're going to do this for us. And it's going to be fair, right? And everybody will come up having achieved what they needed to achieve. And it's fair play. There's really nobody trying to just stifle or kill anybody. Then secondly is access to quality funding, de-risked financing, right? Because we have a lot of people who are building fantastic products and solutions right here in Nigeria, but they do not have access to the quality funding because the billions of dollars you see constantly raised right, in the world. Just a percent, just I think a percent of it or something comes to Nigeria. And so that's really poor. So for us, for our startups, we still want to keep pushing and encouraging more investment to come here. So where there's a lot more local investments, then international investment could come. Because with more local investment, what you do is you de-risk the environment for
Yeah.
international investors to be able to come in. The other thing is, like I talked about, talent training, right? And not just in the regular technical development space, but in all the other sectors. How do we boost the level of skills, right? How do we boost the labor, that the labor is able to meet up to this new evolved future of the different sectors in the economy? And finally is infrastructure. And now I mean all kinds of infrastructure, whether good roads to allow for transporting services to be able to work, whether it is basic housing, quality housing that is affordable for people to be able to have their shops, and whether then there's their internet infrastructure, digital infrastructure, which is internet connectivity. Maybe I don't want to have a physical space. I just want to have an e-commerce space on a Konga or Jumia or any other e-commerce space. How am I able to make sure that I can handle that business there without being intimidated or stifled by anyone? So these are some of the problems
Okay.
that our startups face. And all, yeah, talent, like I said, yeah, finding and retaining quality talent is
Yep.
also is a big one for us.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, because I think it was interesting when I mean, we work primarily in the creative space. So the example that you gave now, just of the lady who's creating, of the makeup artist, is something that so many people within our ecosystem are struggling with. And that idea of, on the one hand, we're saying that, listen, look, this is something that could lead to job creation, could lead to SMEs, to promoting SMEs, all that kind of stuff. And yet, that suddenly overnight, that's it, something you wake up and stuff. And I can imagine that